Hello to all the listeners and of the viewers of the Bridge of Friendship blog and Cross Border Talks. I'm Vladimir Mitev, and today I'm going to have a talk with David Bisset, who used to be the chief executive of Equilibrium, the largest NGO in the social services sector in Bulgaria, and who is now more dealing with research and strategic issues around social care and social change in Bulgaria. He is also a native, let's say, in a way, in my city. He's been living here for Rousse. He's been living here for more than 20 years. David, thank you for accepting this invitation and seeing sense in what I largely defined as some attempt to think in a more complex way about Bulgarian pl- plague or problems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's good if we start with what we see every day on the social networks, especially in these days. We are now recording on the 4th of June, Sunday, and just tomorrow we expect that maybe there will be some vote for the government.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that there is a lot of division in Bulgaria, a lot of hatred, a lot of instigation on social networks, with people basically falling into different tribes and playing game of domination with one another,
Yes.
um, which maybe has a social price. And
Yes.
I was just curious, this game of tribes, the role which it attributes to most of Bulgarians is the role of fans, of people who are like in the gallery of the football match and scream against the opponent. But I was
Yes.
wondering, how can we grow out of this role? How can the what are the means for our citizens to become more empowered and for this game even to change, so that we are not no longer just fans or hooligans.
I like your expression. I like you that you use the word game. I mean, something that's fascinated me for many years, and which I recognized quite soon after settling in Bulgaria 20 years ago, is that Bulgaria is a very tribal society. People cling to their one social group and don't really venture into the realm of community enterprise, community activity. And I've always wondered why this is the case, because it's something I find quite intriguing, but also a quite bewildering, especially as Bulgarians the different groups tend to adopt all sorts of different badges to identify themselves and differentiate themselves from one another. It's quite multidimensional. And certainly it has a political dimension, but I see the politicians as weaponizing something that's already there, that's already exists. And I wonder where it's come from. One of the sort of theories I had, I'm not convinced that I'm right, but it's something that I've recognized, is that Bulgaria was urbanized very, very, very quickly. And I don't think any of the Bulgaria's political masters across the years since urbanization took place have tried very hard to create a sense of community. Uh, Something that interests me is if you speak to a Bulgarian and you ask a Bulgarian where he or she comes from, she'll mention a town or a city. Uh, but then she maybe quite quickly qualifies what she's just said and will say, well, actually, my family comes from a different place, a village in a different part of Bulgaria. if I walk around Rousse, I mean, if I was to go out today and walk around through the big high rise apartment blocks, you see a lot of older people sitting outside in the sun in little groups. They've created little gardens for themselves in the communal areas, and they've planted flowers and they sit under a pagoda with a and have a cup of tea or whatever together. So you can see that people are still sort of, especially the older generation, are still sort of longing for their villages, for a view of the hills, for a view of a river, instead of being in the city and enclosed by all this grey drabness. So I get the impression that people don't really feel terribly at home in the little boxes in which they live in these big apartment blocks. And for me, if you don't feel at home, a sense of being at home, it's very difficult to feel any affinity with your neighbours. The two things to go together, home and neighbours. Rather, I think Bulgarians feel like creatures caught in an urban jungle. And like I say, I don't think there's been much investment in creating a sense of community and unity. I think rather the Bulgarian political class play to a type of fantasy. I mean, if I was to go into Facebook just now and start scrolling through my feed, it would take me no time at all to find a picture of a local mayor or some other public dignitary hosting a ceremony in which they're giving out certificates to people for all sorts of things, but it's some service to Bulgarian culture or uh, Bulgarian learning. So there's this constant reference to a glorious past which never took place, proud tradition which doesn't exist, and achievements which don't really rank in the great scheme of things. And I think this is very divisive because I think it encourages certain people and certain groups who are willing to continue to play this game of make believe, and insufficient attention is actually paid to the reality of everyday life in Bulgaria.
Um, I like your reference to the past and also this understanding in the in let's say that most of Bulgarians originate from the peripheral zones of the country. Let's say there is this division, Sofia,
Absolutely,
in the
yeah.
country. I remember, and it's always true that I've been communicating with people who basically left Rousse, our city,
Hmm.
because they said here I have a good job. Let's say I have a family, I have a children or two, but I can pension in this position in which I am, and I want to do something more in my life. So if people so I say that because it deals with some concept which I have been very much impressed by, the static and the dynamic identity, this contradiction.
Hmm.
So I remember in socialist times there was this concept that you develop while staying in your place. It was basically, this is how the concept is being translated. So people somehow, I guess, were some feeling was created in them that they developed while still not growing in their position, or not moving to a larger city, whatever. And I'm curious about this idea of static identity as a key to understanding many of the things in Bulgaria, like socialization, especially the initial socialization when you are in the high school or in university later. It maybe assigns you to some position, some conviction, some role which you play in society, and I have the feeling people who have been born and grown in transition times they are very much influenced by this static identity, and only at a later moment, if they had some way of rebellion, let's say, or some strong decision to change, they have managed to redefine this position which has been assigned to them. And of course, emigration is one way for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, how much do you think this? Do you have this experience of yours with the static identity in in Bulgaria, which can be seen in many ways, including if you have written, let's say, an article for some socialist media, or you have written for some soceity media, whatever you call them, it somehow people don't engage you, they don't discuss with you, they just like to have this as a label. He has been with them, he has said something with them, with the others. So how influential is this static identity in your view
I
here?
know what you mean by this expectation that people ought to grow while staying where they are, as you put it. But people need some sort of empowerment in order to do that. Uh, when we're sitting here on a Sunday, a weekend, we're both sitting in our own places here in Rousse. And something I experience at the weekends in Rousse are those people from the periphery coming into a city which is essentially their home place. They are residents of Rousse. And at the weekend, they can sometimes come into the centre. Uh, but they give the appearance of wandering around and looking at the place as if they are visitors to some foreign city. It's no longer their home. They're looking at in the new coffee shops where the prices horrify them in the city centre, and say to themselves, "Well, who are these coffee shops designed for?" They're looking at the new buildings that are being built speculatively, and then they look in the window of an estate agency that's advertising apartments in these new buildings, and the prices for a penthouse flat for a view of the Danube are something like €500,000, and they're saying to themselves, well, "Who are these places for?" So how can you expect people to develop when they are bewildered and shocked by what's happening around them? Um,
Okay, I can move also around this a little bit, when again seeing Ruse as source of inspiration, and tribal thinking again. I have observed how people in some moment in their life, early life, let's say maybe school years or university years, they somehow learn. I presume it may be also involuntary, but it may be also very rational, that they need some kind of a tribe, or let's say in group. We use the word taifa maybe,
I've heard the
which
expression.
is of Eastern origin, Persian or Arabic origin. So basically, people, young people, they make a group of their own. They make their own mafia, and they engage the world through this mafia. Basically, some kind of narcissistic leaders come on the top of this group, and they getting information about what is going on beyond the tribe, and they somehow engage other tribes or other people only when they have interest, and when they don't have interest of, basically, when they don't gain something, or when they are not threatened by other tribes or other people, they just don't do anything. They're just satisfied to stand in this tribe at the top, and somehow presumably to manipulate the people who are casual members of the tribe, so that the hierarchy is protected. And
Hmm.
of course, that's my impression or my understanding, but I can't help asking myself, how can a society based on tribes grow out of this model of tribes, and what happens, what is the role which people who are tribeless could play in this, I presume it's modernization, overcoming of tribes. Maybe we define it as modernization. So
Uh,
how can this happen?
I mean, what you're talking about is a very profound lack of what we call social capital. I mean, social capital is a measure of the positivity of the relationships and styles of engagement between different individuals and different groups. And the positive relationships are cemented through actions like collaboration, uh, a little bit of give and take, different people playing to their strengths. And when this happens, all the contributors benefit and the community gets stronger. There's a publication that comes out annually called the Legatum Prosperity Index. And this year, 2023, uh, the index is based on data collected last year, and it ranks countries. 167 different countries are giving a ranking in terms of their overall prosperity. I think there are 12 different sets of indices that measure this prosperity. And on that basis, Bulgaria is ranked 48th out of the 167 countries. I think Romania is 45th. However, if you look at the particular index for social capital, uh, Bulgaria is ranked 81st out of 167, and Romania has got quite a lowly position. It's ranked 116th. There are different types of social capital. There's the relationships between family members and close knit social groups. Uh, there's a question of interpersonal trust within the community, social tolerance. People of different racial backgrounds or different classes or different social status, different occupations, how they tolerate one another. Um, the quality of social networking, the level at which people in society can actually participate in decision making. Um, and it's interesting that social tolerance is very, very low in both Romania and Bulgaria. I know that Bulgaria ranks something like 104th out of 167 countries in how different groups tolerate one another. But where both countries are really lacking is the level of social and civic participation. Uh, Public information in both countries is pretty dismal, pretty terrible. People are not allowed to participate in decision making with regard to developments in their own towns or cities or nationally. Government keeps the population at arm's length, you might say. So, what we need is some sort of mechanism that encourages these things to start to happen. Uh, I'm not quite sure how you kickstart this type of activity, uh, but it certainly does need to happen, Vladimir.
I can give a suggestion how it can happen, but it is maybe not, from, I don't know, maybe from psychological point of view is not the best idea. But I have the feeling many people, especially, that's my also my experience from going out of Bulgaria. Uh, uh, Bulgarians tend to have some guard, to put some guard when they communicate with people who are foreigners or unknown
Hmm.
people. And I have Basically, I think this guard is not lowered because people fear that if they lower the guard, they will be hit. But the strange thing is that, in my view, if some hits are absorbed and received, but somehow you don't, how you transform this experience into something positive, then suddenly or strangely you discover that your world is much bigger. Maybe I'm not suggesting something like the Fight Club, what Fight Club does, the famous movie. Of
Okay.
course, I'm not suggesting this, but I of course, very metaphorically, I suggest that we fear less, or maybe we realize that we are something more than our in group or our tribe, and think of expanding our borders. And
Hmm.
I think expansion of borders, personal, let's say individual borders, is something which can be really empowering, because maybe that's the reason why change happens so slowly in Bulgaria. We are somehow taught to guard very carefully our borders, and not integrate new territories into them. And
Hmm.
usually it is presumed that you integrate when you conquer. I have seen Bulgarian patriots going to Romania, trying to reach out to some villages in Romania where there are some used to be some Bulgarian population, and I think this is futile. For me, it's much more interesting to discover the other space within your own identity, within your own personality, if you wish.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm touching here too many issues, but for me, really, change. I think you are thinking more institutionally and more socially, getting the whole society in complex when you speak about social capital. I have the feeling maybe it's the personal effort of some individuals which could start, let's say, the change. And um, and here is my question, if you wish, now after so many words:
Okay.
what is this social model which is different to the in group? I mean, I have also suggestions of my own, but
Hmm.
uh, if somebody wants to, let's say, modernize this society, this tribal society, what is the better form of society? What is
Okay.
it based on? Not on tribe, but maybe on something else.
Okay, Vladimir. I mean, you've used words like in group, like guardedness. We've talked about tribalism. These all seem to be highly defensive mechanisms or strategies. So, why does Bulgaria feel it needs to defend itself? Why do Bulgarians as individuals act defensively? I mean, are we suggesting that they've got some sort of chip on their shoulder, some sort of inferiority complex, uh, some sort of sense of inadequacy when they encounter people, maybe especially people from the West? Um, I'm not sure. Um, I think a problem in Bulgaria is that certainly now, but also in past times in this century, you've been sort of the plaything or the football of great powers. Uh, at the moment, it's primarily the European Union, um, but we could also talk about the United States, Russia. Who knows when China might might want to pitch in and start developing its interest in this region. Uh, and these great powers all bring with them us what we sometimes refer to as an imitation imperative. To succeed, you have to behave like us. To prosper, you have to behave like us. Uh, you can see this played out in the human rights dimension as well. You know, And when people are making that sort of proposition to you, it does make you feel uncomfortable and defensive. Uh, we, we, we've talked in the past, Vladimir, about cross border activity and perhaps some sort of mini Schengen arrangement, which could, I think, encourage Bulgarians to think a little bit more in terms of their own self development, to think a little bit expansively within the region instead of sitting waiting for the great powers to come to Bulgaria and make certain offers. Uh, I think Bulgaria needs to find its young adventurers. Uh, Perhaps they're there among those who have worked overseas and come back with with a certain degree of know-how, development in their attitudes, um, a desire to be innovative and creative, a desire to explore, a curiosity. Um, Maybe these are the individuals we've got to look towards.